This is my true story. After my wife passed, my whole life became about my daughter, making sure she was safe and always cared for her. I never imagined she'd turn on me. But one summer afternoon, she left me locked inside her car for hours in the sweltering heat. No open windows, no water, just burning air and silence. I could have died that day. But I survived, and I made sure she would never see me or her apartment again. Before I tell you what I did next, tell me where you're watching from. And please don't forget to subscribe so my stories can reach more people like me. From the day my daughter was born, she became my reason to wake up in the morning. Her mother died when she was just 6, and from then on, it was just the two of us. I was both father and mother to her. I made her breakfast every morning before school, even if it meant waking up at 4 a.m. after working a night shift. I walked her to the bus stop in the rain, in the snow, in the blistering heat, because I didn't want her to feel alone. I worked double shifts at the factory, sometimes taking on extra weekend jobs, just so I could afford her school trips, her clothes, her books. I never once complained, because seeing her happy was worth every aching muscle and every sleepless night. When she turned 16, she asked me for her first car. I didn't have the money, but I sold my old watch, the only thing I had left from my father, to make the down payment. The day she drove it home, she hugged me and said I was the best dad in the world. I believed her. I thought that bond would never break. When she graduated from college, I was the one who cheered the loudest. I sat in the crowd with tears in my eyes, thinking about all the nights I went without dinner so she could have enough. I paid for her apartment when she got her first job in the city, telling her it was her fresh start. She cried and said she didn't know what she'd do without me. Years later, when she married, I was there front row, smiling like the proudest father alive. I paid for most of her wedding without telling anyone, using the savings I had built over decades. I told myself it was worth it because she was my only family, and I wanted her to feel secure. Even after she had her own place, I was always there when she needed me. She'd call and say the car wasn't working, and I'd drive 2 hours to fix it. She'd ask me to babysit her kids so she and her husband could have a night out, and I'd cancel my own plans to be there. Every time she'd say, "Thanks, Dad," with a quick smile, and I'd tell myself it was enough. I never kept count of what I gave her. Money, time, energy, my health. I never thought I had to. A parent doesn't keep score. I thought that when my health started to slow me down, she'd be there for me, the same way I had been there for her all these years. I thought she'd take my arm when I walked slower, or remember to check in when she knew I was unwell. I thought wrong. Even when I noticed her visits becoming shorter, her calls less frequent, I made excuses for her. She's busy, she's tired, she has her own life. I didn't want to believe my daughter, the one I'd carried through every storm, could ever look at me as if I were a burden. But love can blind you. It can make you overlook the small cracks until they turn into something impossible to ignore. And I didn't see the full truth until the day she left me locked in her car under the summer sun. The day that burned not just my skin, but every memory I thought we shared. That was the day my role in her life changed. I was no longer the father she needed. I was just an inconvenience she tolerated. It started small. So small that if I had wanted to, I could have ignored it forever. But looking back now, I can see the signs were already there. After her marriage, my daughter's visits became less frequent. At first, I told myself it was normal. She had a husband now, a busy life, new responsibilities. But the truth was, she wasn't just busy. She was distant. The calls that used to be full of excitement and warmth turned into short, clipped conversations. "Hi, Dad, I'm busy. I'll call you later." Later would sometimes be days, sometimes weeks. When she did call, it was usually because she needed something: help with the kids, someone to pick up groceries, money to fix something at her apartment, and I never said no. I couldn't. She was my daughter. I told myself that's what parents are for. Even when my own back ached from lifting heavy boxes or my wallet was already thin from paying my own bills. Then there were the times she promised to pick me up for a doctor's appointment or a family dinner. and simply didn't show. No call, no explanation, just silence. I would sit by the window, watching the street, convincing myself she'd be there any minute. When she finally did call hours later, she'd brush it off with a laugh. "Oh, I forgot, Dad. You know how it is." And I'd tell her it was fine, even though deep down, it stung. Her tone began to change too. Little things I did started to bother her. If I asked her to slow down while driving, she'd sigh loudly, roll her eyes, and mutter something under her breath. If I took an extra minute in the grocery store aisle, she'd tap her foot impatiently. Once, when I asked her to help me carry something up the stairs, she told me I should try to stay independent because she didn't want me getting too used to her help. I laughed it off in the moment, but I felt the jab in her words. It was the way she looked at me sometimes that hurt the most, like she was measuring how much of a problem I might become in her life, like she was already preparing herself to keep me at arm's length. There were family gatherings where she'd arrive late and leave early, barely speaking to me. Times when she'd be on her phone while I was talking, nodding absently without really hearing a word I said. I'd watch her laugh and lean in close to her friends, giving them a warmth that I remembered from years ago, warmth that she no longer had for me. I kept telling myself that love is unconditional, that I'd weather this phase and she'd come back around. I thought about all the things I'd done for her. The nights I stayed awake at her bedside when she was sick, the times I went without so she could have what she needed, the sacrifices I made to make sure her life was better than mine. I thought those things meant something. But the distance kept growing, and it wasn't just physical distance. It was something colder, something harder to ignore. She stopped asking how I was. She stopped noticing when I was tired or when I needed help. I became someone who existed in the background of her life, useful when she needed something, invisible when she didn't. And still, I didn't say anything. I told myself to be grateful for the moments I still had with her. I told myself she loved me deep down, that maybe she just didn't know how to show it anymore. But the truth was, I was holding on to a version of her that didn't exist anymore. It would take a hot summer afternoon in a locked car to make me see it for what it really was. That day, every illusion I had left about my daughter's love burned away, leaving only the truth, and a resolve I never knew I had. It was one of those summer days where the heat feels heavy, pressing down on you like a weight you can't shake off. The kind of day where even standing in the shade makes you sweat. My daughter called that morning, asking if I wanted to go with her into the city. She said she had errands to run, and we could have lunch after. I agreed without hesitation. I thought maybe it was her way of spending time with me, of closing the gap that had been growing between us. I even put on my best shirt, hoping the day would be pleasant. When she pulled up, I noticed she seemed distracted. She barely greeted me, just waved for me to get in the passenger seat. I didn't think much of it. We drove with the windows up, air conditioner on, and I tried to make conversation, but she gave short answers, her eyes fixed ahead. I told myself she was just focused on driving in traffic. We reached a large shopping mall downtown. She pulled into the parking lot and stopped in a space far from the entrance. I assumed she'd park there so we could walk in together. Instead, she put the car in park, turned off the engine, and looked at me. "I just need to run inside for a quick errand," she said. "It'll be 5 minutes. Wait here." I asked if I could come along, maybe stretch my legs, but she shook her head. "No, it'll be faster if I go alone. Just stay in the car." She rolled the windows all the way up, locked the doors with the key fob, and stepped out without another word. I thought maybe she was rushing and didn't think about the heat. I didn't want to make a fuss, so I stayed quiet. 5 minutes passed, then 10. The air inside the car was already starting to change. Without the engine running, there was no air conditioning. The sun poured through the windshield, turning the inside of the car into an oven. I loosened my shirt collar and shifted in my seat, trying to find a spot that felt cooler. It didn't work. 15 minutes became 30. I tried opening the door to get out, but of course, it was locked from the outside. I tapped on the window lightly when I saw people walking past, hoping maybe someone would notice and ask if I needed help. No one did. I didn't want to draw too much attention. The last thing I wanted was to embarrass my daughter. An hour passed. My shirt was soaked in sweat. My throat was dry. The air was thick and heavy, every breath feeling harder than the last. I wiped my forehead with my hand, feeling how hot my skin was. I started to feel lightheaded. The heat wasn't just uncomfortable anymore, it was dangerous. I kept glancing toward the mall entrance, expecting her to come out at any moment. I pictured her walking back with a smile, maybe apologizing for taking so long. But there was no sign of her. The parking lot shimmered in the heat, and the longer I sat there, the more I realized she wasn't rushing back. By the second hour, my body felt weak. My hands trembled when I tried to wipe the sweat from my face. My breathing was shallow. I thought about trying to wave down someone nearby, but my voice felt stuck in my throat. A small part of me, the part that still wanted to believe she cared, kept saying, she wouldn't do this on purpose. But another voice, quieter yet sharper, whispered that she had done exactly this on purpose, that maybe she didn't care if I was sitting here in this heat, struggling to breathe. I thought about the years I'd given her, the meals I skipped so she could eat, the clothes I patched until they couldn't be patched anymore so she could have something new, the apartment she loved so much, bought with my own savings, and yet here I was, locked in her car like an afterthought. Time lost all meaning. I don't know how long I sat there after that. I just remember feeling like the heat was inside me now, like my chest was heavy and my head was spinning. I pressed my palm to the window glass, hoping it would feel cool. It didn't. Then, after what felt like forever, I saw her walking back, shopping bags in both hands, not hurrying, not looking concerned, just strolling. She reached the car, opened the driver's side door, and slid in like nothing had happened. "You're fine," she said, glancing at me for a second. "Don't be so dramatic." She started the engine and cool air filled the car again, but it didn't erase the hours I'd just spent in suffocating heat. It didn't erase the fact that she had left me there, locked in, while she went about her errands. I stared out the window the rest of the ride home, my mind strangely quiet. Not because I wasn't thinking, but because I was thinking about something I'd never thought about before. I was thinking about leaving. The first few minutes after she walked away, I still believed she would be quick. I told myself not to overthink it, not to assume the worst. I looked at the mall entrance every few seconds, expecting her to reappear. But as the minutes dragged into something longer, the car began to change. The air wasn't just warm, it became thick, suffocating, almost impossible to draw into my lungs. I shifted in my seat, loosening my belt, unbuttoning the top of my shirt. Sweat started rolling down my face and soaking the fabric. I wiped it with my sleeve, but it did nothing. The sun was relentless, glaring through the windshield and pressing against my skin like fire. The steering wheel in front of me looked like it could burn to the touch. The air was still. There was no escape. I glanced around at the other cars in the lot. People came and went, carrying bags, talking on their phones, laughing, living their lives. No one noticed me. No one could see that an old man was locked inside this metal box, baking like bread in an oven. I thought about calling someone, but my phone was in my jacket, and my jacket was at home. I had trusted my daughter, so I had left it behind. 20 minutes passed. My body began to feel heavier. I leaned my head back against the seat, trying to slow my breathing, but every inhale felt hot. My mouth was dry, my tongue sticking to the roof of my mouth. I swallowed, but it didn't help. I took small sips from the water bottle in the cup holder, but the water had already turned warm, almost boiling. Each sip made me more aware of how much I was sweating, losing more water than I could take in. My eyes started to blur. A dull throb built in the back of my head, spreading forward. I knew this was no longer just discomfort. This was dangerous. I'd read stories of people trapped in hot cars. Usually, it was about children or pets. But here I was, a grown man, experiencing it myself. I thought about the irony. that I had raised a daughter to be careful, to care, to protect the vulnerable. And now she was the one putting me in this position. 45 minutes. My shirt clung to me like wet paper. My legs felt weak just sitting there. I tried shifting to the side, leaning toward the crack between the seat and the door, hoping for even the faintest breeze. Nothing. My vision pulsed every time my heart beat. I realized I was breathing shallowly without meaning to, my body conserving what little strength I had left. An hour passed. My mind drifted between memories and the present moment. I thought about her as a little girl, clutching my hand as we crossed busy streets, asking for one more bedtime story, telling me she'd always love me. I thought about my wife, gone too soon, and how I had promised her I'd give our daughter the best life possible. I had kept that promise. But now, my own daughter was treating me like a piece of luggage, something she could leave behind without a second thought. By the 90-minute mark, the edges of my vision began to fade in and out. I felt dizzy, my stomach uneasy. I tried counting to keep my mind focused, counting the cars that drove past, counting my breaths, but I would lose track halfway through. My thoughts weren't sharp anymore. They came in pieces. The heat was stealing them from me. Every once in a while, I'd hear footsteps outside the car and think it was her. I would straighten in my seat, gathering what little strength I had, only to see a stranger walk past without looking at me. The disappointment cut deeper each time. I realized something then. This wasn't just negligence. She didn't care. She didn't think about me sitting there. Or worse, maybe she did, and it didn't matter to her. 2 hours. My hands trembled when I wiped the sweat from my forehead. My breathing was faster now, not because I wanted it to be, but because my body seemed desperate for air it couldn't find. I wanted to close my eyes, but I knew that if I did, I might not open them again. I stayed awake out of sheer will. Somewhere between the second and third hour, I stopped looking toward the mall entrance. I stopped expecting her to return quickly. My thoughts shifted. I wasn't thinking about rescue anymore. I was thinking about survival. And underneath that, something colder started forming. It was the realization that this moment would not be forgotten. Not by me. When she finally did come back, I was too weak to speak right away. She swung the door open, a rush of cooler air hitting my face, but it wasn't refreshing. It was almost painful, like my body didn't know how to handle it. She dumped her shopping bags in the back seat and glanced at me briefly. "You're fine," she said, her voice flat. "Don't be dramatic." The engine started. Air conditioning hummed to life. But inside me, something stayed still and cold. I stared out the window as we drove home. I didn't respond when she tried to talk about the things she'd bought. I wasn't angry in the way most people think of anger, loud, quick, and sharp. My anger was silent, heavy, the kind that plans. By the time we reached the driveway, my mind was already somewhere else, somewhere far away from that house, somewhere far away from her. I didn't know the details yet, but I knew one thing. She had locked me in a car in the heat and left me to suffer, and I was never going to let her have that kind of power over me again. When she finally came back to the car, the sun was already beginning its slow slide downward, but the heat was still pressing against everything like a heavy hand. I heard the click of the locks before I saw her face. My eyes moved slowly toward her, my head feeling heavier than it should. She opened the door, tossed a few glossy shopping bags into the back seat without care, and slid into the driver's seat. There was no urgency in her movements, no concern, no recognition that I had been trapped for hours inside a sweltering metal box. She glanced at me just once, her eyes scanning me up and down like I was nothing more than an object taking up space. "You're fine," she said casually, her voice carrying no warmth. "Don't be dramatic." Then she turned the key, the car humming to life as cold air finally began to flow from the vents. The first blast of air didn't feel good. It was almost painful. My body, overheated and exhausted, seemed to resist it. I sat back, my arms trembling slightly as the sweat on my skin began to dry in patches. I didn't answer her. I didn't tell her how dizzy I had been, how close I felt to passing out, or how my heart had pounded against my ribs like it was trying to escape. I just looked forward, my gaze fixed on the empty road ahead. She started talking about the clothes she bought, holding up a blouse still wrapped in crinkling plastic. Her tone was cheerful now, as if the last few hours had been nothing. I nodded faintly, but my mind was not with her anymore. It was somewhere else entirely. It was counting the hours I had been locked inside that car. It was remembering the exact look she gave me when she said, "Don't be dramatic." It was then I realized something. There would be no apology. Not that day, not the next, not ever. Because to apologize, you have to feel guilt, and guilt requires seeing the other person as human. In that car, in that heat, she hadn't seen her father. She had seen something disposable. The drive home was quiet. I didn't break the silence, and she didn't notice. Her mind was on her shopping, her phone, her own world. My mind, however, had started to take shape in a different way. It wasn't the kind of anger that bursts and fades. This was something colder, heavier, quieter. I didn't want to shout at her. I didn't want to cry in front of her. I wanted to leave her exactly the way she had left me, stuck, helpless, and with no control over what happened next. By the time we pulled into her driveway, the plan was still just a shadow in my mind, but it was growing. I stepped out of the car slowly, my legs unsteady from the hours of heat, but I didn't let her see. She gathered her bags, barely looking at me, and went inside first. I followed, not saying a word. The house felt cooler, but I didn't feel at home in it anymore. Not even in the guest room where I stayed when I visited. That night, I lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling. I thought about every sacrifice I had made for her, the years of work, the long nights, the dreams I'd set aside so she could have more. And now, in return, she had given me hours in a locked car with no water, no care, no thought of my well-being. I turned to the side and closed my eyes, but sleep didn't come. My mind kept replaying the scene, her walking away from the car, her bags swinging at her side, her calm voice telling me I was fine when she returned. Those words settled deep inside me, cold and hard. I realized that day had changed something permanent in me. The bond between us was already thin, frayed from small cuts over the years. The missed calls, the dismissive tone, the way she sometimes looked at me like I was a problem to be solved instead of a person to be loved. But that afternoon had cut through the last fibers. There was nothing left to repair. I decided then that there would be no confrontation, no argument, no scene. Just as she had left me without thought in that car, I would leave her without warning in her life. But my leaving wouldn't be empty. It would carry weight. It would take something from her. I knew exactly what. That apartment she loved so much, the one she showed off to her friends as if she had worked her whole life for it, wasn't really hers. It was mine. I had paid for it in full, put it in my name, and kept the documents safe. I had never signed it over. She never asked, probably assuming it was just an unspoken gift. But she had forgotten that gifts can be taken back. That night, I looked at the ceiling and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Control. I didn't have to tell her what I was thinking. I didn't have to warn her. I just had to act. The next morning, when she came into the kitchen and poured herself coffee, she smiled and asked if I had slept well. I smiled back, lied, and said yes. She went on about her plans for the day. I listened quietly, my mind already far ahead, mapping out each step of what I would do. I was going to disappear from her life exactly the way she had disappeared from mine in that parking lot, without a second glance, without a care. That apartment was her pride. Every time I visited, she made sure to show me something new she had added. A framed picture on the wall, a rug in the living room, a new coffee table. She would host her friends there, letting them believe it was her own hard work that made it possible. I never corrected her. I just smiled, sat quietly, and let her talk. But what she didn't know, or maybe what she had chosen to forget, was that the apartment was still mine. Every brick, every tile, every piece of paper with that address on it belonged to me. I had paid for it in full years ago after she graduated. It was my way of saying, "You have a place in this world. You'll never have to worry about rent." I thought giving her stability would mean she'd live with gratitude. I never imagined it would turn into entitlement. The truth was, she had no legal claim to it. Her name wasn't on the deed. She never asked if it was. She assumed. She assumed that just because I was her father, everything I owned was hers. She assumed I would never take it away from her. That was her mistake. I remembered signing those purchase documents, the lawyer's pen scratching across the paper. I remembered putting the original deed in a folder, locking it in my safe. Over the years, I had kept every receipt, every proof of ownership, every record of the payments I'd made. They were all still there, untouched, waiting. She thought she had all the power now. She thought because I was older, slower, and dependent on her for rides, she could treat me however she liked. That afternoon in the car proved it. She didn't see me as the man who had raised her alone after her mother passed. She didn't see the man who had skipped meals so she could have a warm one. She saw an inconvenience, someone she could leave in a locked car for hours without thinking twice. But here's the thing about power. It changes hands when you least expect it. She had the keys to the car that day, but I had the keys to her life, and she didn't even realize it. The thought made me calm, strangely calm. It wasn't about shouting at her or making her feel guilty. Guilt wouldn't last. Comfort would return to her quickly. No, I wanted her to feel the kind of loss you don't come back from easily, the kind that wakes you up in the middle of the night and keeps you staring at the ceiling. The apartment was the center of her life. It was her safe place, her status symbol, her proof to the world that she had made it. She loved telling people she had bought it herself, that she was independent. I was about to take all of that away. I didn't have to scheme or twist anything. I already owned it outright. Selling it was just a matter of paperwork. She couldn't stop me. She couldn't even slow me down. All I had to do was make the call, but I wasn't going to rush. I had learned patience over the years, especially in the years after her mother's passing, when every day was a quiet fight to survive. I knew that acting in silence made the biggest impact. If she saw anything coming, she might try to sweeten her words, try to play the part of the loving daughter again. I didn't want that. I wanted her to have no idea until it was too late. That night, I unlocked my safe. My hands moved steadily, no shaking, no hesitation. I took out the folder with the documents and laid them on the table. There it was in black and white. My name, not hers. The property was mine. Always had been. I felt a quiet satisfaction seeing it again, not because I enjoyed the idea of taking something from her, but because it reminded me that she had never truly held the power she thought she did. The next day, I went to my lawyer. He was surprised to see me. I hadn't been in his office in years. We sat down, and I told him exactly what I wanted to do. His eyebrows lifted slightly, but he didn't question my reasons. He had seen enough in his line of work to know that family can be both your greatest gift and your greatest disappointment. He pulled out the necessary forms, and we went through them carefully. It would be a private sale, quiet and quick, no public listing. I wanted no chance of word getting back to her before the papers were signed. We set a date. I signed where I needed to sign, and then I walked out into the sunlight feeling lighter than I had in years. On the way back, I passed the street where her apartment stood. I didn't look at it for long. I didn't need to. I already knew that soon it wouldn't be hers to pretend about anymore. Soon, she'd come home and find strangers moving their furniture in, and she'd realize in an instant just how wrong she'd been to think I was powerless. This wasn't petty revenge. This was balance. She had left me in a locked car for hours, under a punishing sun, without a thought for my health or my dignity. Now, I would leave her without the roof she took for granted, and I wouldn't say a single word. Once the decision was made, there was no turning back. I woke up the next morning with a clear mind, sharper than I had felt in years. The plan was simple, clean, quiet, and final. I wasn't going to shout, argue, or give her a chance to twist the story. I was going to remove myself from her life the same way she had removed respect from mine. Suddenly, without warning. The first step was keeping my mouth shut. Silence is stronger than anger. Anger warns people. Silence keeps them blind. Around her, I acted as if nothing had changed. When she came by to drop something off or to drag me along to run errands, I spoke softly, even smiled at the right moments. I gave her no reason to suspect that in a matter of weeks, the apartment she called hers would be gone. The second step was preparation. My lawyer already had the ball rolling from our last meeting. He was finding a cash buyer, someone who would move fast, no delays, no fuss. The beauty of the arrangement was that it didn't require her consent, her signature, or her awareness. She had no part in it legally, so she would have no say when the deal was done. The third step was ensuring my exit. Selling the apartment was one thing, but disappearing was the real revenge. I wanted to be unreachable. No calls, no visits, no chance for her to knock on my door with excuses or tears. I started transferring small amounts of money to an overseas account I had kept from my younger days, back when I dreamed of retiring abroad. She had no idea it even existed. Every day, I quietly sorted through my belongings. Not everything, just the things I would need: clothes, personal papers, a few photographs that still meant something to me. Everything else could stay behind. The fewer traces I left, the cleaner the break would be. I kept a small suitcase under my bed, slowly adding to it until it was ready to be zipped shut at a moment's notice. The fourth step was timing. I had to choose the right day, the right hour. She needed to be far away when the papers were signed. I needed her to be out living her life, confident in the lie she told herself, that I was harmless, that she had nothing to fear from me. My lawyer and I agreed on a date that worked perfectly. In the days leading up to it, I thought often about that summer afternoon in the car. I could still feel the suffocating heat, the way the air inside felt thick and dead. I remembered wiping sweat from my forehead with the back of my hand, wondering if I might faint. I remembered looking out the window at strangers walking by, thinking how easy it would be for her to just crack the glass open, and how she chose not to. That memory wasn't going anywhere. And neither was my resolve. The night before the sale, I sat in my chair with the lights off, looking at the small pile of items I was taking with me. I thought about the years I had spent putting her first, working extra shifts to pay for her schooling, skipping meals to make sure she never went without. I thought about the nights I stayed awake when she was sick, the mornings I walked her to school in the cold, the way her face lit up when she got her first car. And then I thought about how easily she had thrown it all away. One locked car door, one choice to leave me sweating for hours, knowing I was in pain and not caring enough to hurry back. That was the day she made it clear. She had no loyalty to me, no respect, no gratitude. I was just a body taking up space in her world. But soon, her world would get smaller. I spent that last night in my bed, calm, ready. My suitcase stood against the wall, the documents were in my bag, and my passport was tucked into my jacket. I set my alarm for an early hour, knowing I would be long gone before she even started her day. Morning came, and I dressed in silence. No breakfast, no coffee. I didn't want to leave any trace of a routine. I picked up my suitcase, locked my door behind me, and walked to the taxi I had arranged the night before. The driver didn't know where I was going beyond the train station. That's how I wanted it. No details, no trail. At my lawyer's office, the paperwork was ready. The buyer was already waiting. We shook hands, signed the final documents, and within an hour, the apartment was no longer mine. The funds were transferred immediately to my overseas account. Just like that, it was done. Clean. Final. I didn't feel joy. I didn't feel guilt. I felt something far more satisfying. Closure. The kind that doesn't need applause or explanation. The kind that comes from knowing that someone who underestimated you will now have to live with the consequences. As I left the office, I didn't look back. I walked straight to the station, boarded the train, and watched the city fade behind me. Each mile put more distance between me and the woman who used to be my daughter. By the time she learned what had happened, I would be gone. Not hiding, just out of reach. Somewhere she couldn't touch, couldn't control, couldn't humiliate me again. And that, I decided, was exactly where I belonged. The day I left was not loud, not messy, not rushed. It was clean. I woke before the sun, the world still dark and quiet, the air cool against my skin. I moved through my small space without turning on the lights. I had already decided, the less I touched, the less I disturbed, the better. This wasn't about leaving a dramatic scene. It was about erasing myself from hers. My suitcase was already packed. Clothes folded neatly, documents tucked inside a leather folder, cash and bank cards in my inner pocket. My passport was where it had always been, but this time it felt heavier in my hand, like it carried a different kind of power, the power to step out of the life I had known and into one that was completely mine. I looked around one last time, the chair where I had sat reading most nights, the small table where I drank my morning tea, the corner where my shoes lined up, always neatly arranged. All of it would stay. These weren't things worth carrying, not compared to the weight I was about to drop from my shoulders. Outside, the street was empty. The taxi I had booked waited at the corner, its headlights soft in the darkness. The driver didn't ask questions when I placed my suitcase in the trunk. I gave him the address to my lawyer's office, and we drove in silence. The city was still asleep, unaware that one of its stories was ending for good. At the office, the transaction was already in motion. My lawyer greeted me with a quiet nod. He understood the importance of not wasting a second. The buyer was there too, a man who didn't know me and didn't need to. We shook hands out of courtesy, then sat down to sign the final stack of papers. Each stroke of the pen felt like a step out the door. The moment the last document was signed, my lawyer confirmed the transfer. The funds hit my account within minutes, locked away in a place she would never find, protected by numbers she would never guess. I had cut the one chain she still thought she held. From there, I didn't linger. I walked out of the building, past the cafe where she sometimes met her friends, past the streets we used to walk together when she was young. None of it meant anything now. The people rushing past me had no idea they were watching a father walk away from his child for the last time. I reached the train station and bought a ticket for a destination I had chosen weeks earlier. It was far enough to be unreachable, but not so far that it felt unreal. I wanted a place I could build a life quietly, without eyes watching me or voices judging me. The train would take me to the coast, where a ferry would carry me to the next chapter. As I waited for the train, I kept my phone in my pocket. It was still switched on, still connected, but I wasn't going to use it. Soon, I would leave it behind entirely. I imagined the day she would try to call, the ring that would go unanswered, the texts that would never deliver. That was part of the plan, to give her silence so loud it would echo. When the train arrived, I boarded without looking back. I found my seat by the window and watched the city slide past, its tall buildings fading into fields and open space. Each mile was another layer of distance between me and her cruelty. I could still see her face in my mind, the way she looked when she came back to that car after hours of leaving me in the heat. No concern, no apology, just a cold dismissal. That image didn't hurt anymore. It fueled me. I reached the coast by mid-afternoon. The sea air was different, sharp, alive, carrying the sound of gulls overhead. I booked a small room for the night, knowing I'd be gone again in the morning. The ferry ticket was already in my pocket, the next step already waiting. By the time she discovered what had happened, I would be across the water. I imagined her walking up to the apartment, maybe carrying bags of shopping or chatting on her phone, only to find strangers moving furniture through the doorway. I could see her confusion turn to panic, the way her voice might rise when she asked what was happening. And then the moment she learned the truth, that the apartment was no longer hers, that it never really was, that it had been sold legally and cleanly. She would call me then, over and over. I knew she would, but the phone would never ring in my hands. It would be gone by then, left behind in a place she couldn't reach. She would try the police, try a lawyer, maybe even try family friends. None of it would matter. The law was on my side, and I was no longer in her world. That night, in the small room by the water, I slept without fear for the first time in years. No one could lock me in a car again. No one could speak to me like I was disposable. No one could decide my worth. I had taken back everything she thought she controlled, and I had done it without raising my voice. When morning came, I stood on the deck of the ferry, watching the shore grow smaller in the distance. The wind was cold, the sky wide, and for the first time, I felt the kind of freedom that comes when you've walked away with nothing left to lose, and nothing left for them to take. It happened faster than she could process. One moment, my daughter was walking up the street toward what she believed was her apartment. She was carrying 2 grocery bags, keys in hand, already distracted by her phone. She didn't notice anything unusual at first. The building was the same, the front door still there. But then, as she reached the entrance, she saw them. Strangers she had never met, carrying her furniture out the door. The sofa she bragged about buying, the dining table I had chosen for her years ago, even the old armchair she once swore she would never get rid of. It was all being lifted, piece by piece, into a moving truck parked right in front of the building. At first, she thought it was a mistake. She dropped her grocery bags right there on the pavement and rushed toward the door. "What's going on?" she demanded. The movers barely looked at her. One of them told her flatly, "This place has been sold. We were told to clear it out today." Her confusion turned to disbelief. No, this is my apartment," she said, trying to push past them. But they didn't move aside. They had a work order with the new owner's name on it, and her name wasn't anywhere on it. That's when it started to sink in. Her eyes darted to the mailbox panel by the entrance. Where her name had once been on a little white label, there was now a strip of paper with someone else's. She froze. Her voice broke when she asked, "Who sold it?" The answer came from the building manager, who had been watching from the lobby. "The legal owner," he said simply. "It was sold last week. The deed changed hands. You should have received notice." Her face drained of color. She stammered something about it being impossible, that she was the owner. But then the truth hit. She had never been the legal owner. I had been. She had just lived there, comfortably assuming it was hers. She had forgotten the papers she never signed, the details she never asked about. She had thought I was too old, too soft, too sentimental to ever take it away. She pulled out her phone and dialed my number. Once. Twice. Then again and again. Each time, the same thing. The call didn't go through. She tried leaving a message, but the line was already disconnected. She tried texting. No delivery. Her panic grew. She called her husband, her friends, anyone who might know where I was. No one did. She called my lawyer's office, but he wouldn't give her anything beyond, "Your father has handled his affairs privately." The tone was final, unshakable. Then came the anger. She shouted at the movers, demanding they stop. She begged the building manager to reverse it. She threatened to call the police. The building manager calmly told her that the sale was fully legal, that she had no claim, no right, no way to stop it. She stood on the sidewalk as the last of her things were loaded into the truck. The movers shut the back doors and drove away. The new owner arrived, a middle-aged woman holding a set of shiny keys, and walked right past her without a word. The woman didn't need to speak. Her presence alone said it. "This is mine now." My daughter was left standing there, with 2 bags of melting groceries at her feet, the summer sun pressing down on her. The heat she had once left me to suffer in now burning her skin. I wonder if she felt it, the mirror image of the day she locked me in that car. The suffocation, the helplessness, the realization that no one was coming to rescue her. She had to call a friend to pick her up. There was nowhere else to go. Her so-called friends, the ones she bragged to about her apartment, were suddenly too busy to help. Her husband wasn't answering her calls. The people she thought would stand beside her were nowhere to be found. By nightfall, she was sleeping on a couch in someone else's living room, The apartment she had called her own was gone. The life she had built inside it was scattered between a moving truck and a second-hand store. She tried, over the next few days, to track me down. Social media posts, calls to relatives, even messages through mutual acquaintances. All of it hit the same wall: silence. Eventually, she stopped trying. Not because she found me, but because she realized she never would. She didn't know which country I was in, or even which continent. And deep down, she understood why I had left without a word. The truth was sharp, cold, and final. I had given her everything, and she had left me to suffer. So I took back what I could, and I left her to live in the world she had created for me, empty, hot, and alone. I never went back, not once, not for a visit, not for a holiday, not even for a funeral. The chapter of my life that had her in it was closed the moment I stepped onto that train and left the city behind. I didn't need to see her face again to know what I had done was final. Some things you don't undo. I moved to a small coastal town halfway across the world. The kind of place where the air smells of salt and the mornings are slow and quiet. My new home isn't big, just 2 rooms and a balcony that looks over the ocean. But it's mine, truly mine, paid for in full with the same money that once kept her roof over her head. The first morning I woke up there, I walked out to the balcony before sunrise. The sky was still dark, but the sound of the waves was steady, calming. As the sun rose, the water lit up gold and silver. I breathed in, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel like someone's burden. I didn't feel unwanted. I didn't feel small. I felt free. Life here is simple. I buy fresh bread and fruit from the market every morning. I take my time walking back, greeting the same smiling faces along the way. No one here knows what I left behind. No one here knows my daughter's name. I like it that way. The past can't reach me when it has no address. Sometimes I sit by the pier in the afternoons, watching the fishing boats come in. The fishermen wave, and I wave back. They don't ask questions about my life, and I don't offer answers. In the evenings, I read old books or listened to the radio, the sound of the sea filling the silence between songs. Nights are cool here, the kind where you pull a blanket up to your chest and fall asleep to the rhythm of waves breaking. I never check the news from back home. I never ask about her. If she's still in that city, if she's still sleeping on someone else's couch, or if she's managed to start over, it doesn't matter to me. She made her choice the day she locked me in that car under the summer sun and left me there for hours. I made mine when I sold the apartment out from under her and walked away without looking back. People sometimes talk about forgiveness, about letting go. But they forget that letting go doesn't always mean opening your arms. Sometimes it means closing the door and walking so far that no one can follow. I didn't leave to punish her. I left to save myself, to stop waiting for an apology that would never come. If I had stayed, I would have been a shadow in my own life, forever under her control, forever treated like a problem instead of a person. But here, I'm not anyone's problem. I'm just a man living quietly by the sea. I eat when I'm hungry. I sleep when I'm tired. I talk to people who speak with kindness. I no longer count the days between insults or measure my worth by someone else's convenience. There are moments when I think about her, but they're like passing clouds. They drift in, they drift out, and the sky clears again. I don't imagine reunions. I don't imagine explanations. I certainly don't imagine her changing. She is who she showed me she was, and I believe her. Some mornings, I walk along the shore and find small seashells washed up on the sand. I pocket them, not because they're valuable, but because they remind me of survival. Something tossed around by waves for years, scraped and battered, and yet still here. That's me. She might have left me in the heat, but I found the cool air. She might have taken my comfort, but I took back my life. And so, when I think of her now, there's no rage left, no shouting inside me, just a single solid truth. She left me to sweat and suffocate, and I left her to live in the cold emptiness she made for herself. We're both exactly where we put each other. The only difference is, I'm at peace.